Welcome to Marvel Source. I'm Bifna, and today we're diving into a little bit more behind who Echo is. She recently appeared in the Hawkeye episodes that are on Disney Plus, and there's not really much known about her that is given through the show. We get a little bit of a backstory, but I feel this David Mack run of Daredevil, this issue, this number 51 issue, has a little bit more of an insight of who Echo is, and the art style in this issue is just phenomenal. If nothing else, the story could suck, but this art is just beautiful in here, and I can't wait to show you it. And just to be safe than sorry, I'm giving you guys a spoiler warning right now. I'm not sure if any of this information will translate over to the Hawkeye show in the coming episodes, but I'm gonna just get ahead of it now, and you have the chance to turn around. And right at the beginning, you get this beautiful full-page shot of Echo, this beautiful watercolor art style that they got going on, which I just love. And the whole issue is like this, where it looks like someone's painted every single page. Some of them are in different art style than this watercolor, but a lot of them are very similar to this one. And they have this kind of writing like someone is adding to it on their own freehand instead of the natural comic look that you've come to be familiar with in other comics. And we get a nice little introduction to Maya Lopez, who is Echo. In the show, she isn't called Echo yet. We do know her as Maya. The newspaper does go as far to call her Echo, and as the writing shows, you get these little marks around the O of Echo, which is the same as those marks you see on her shirt in the show, the tattoo on her father's chest of that almost sun-like Ray-Bans coming out from a circle. And I love how it leads us down to this little blurb at the bottom where it says this issue isn't going to happen in words. It happens in movements and memories, shapes and feelings, because she is deaf. So I feel like it plays off a lot of what she sees and feels more so than the words between characters. But I imagine we get a lot of the wordage through her thoughts when it needs to be put in. Echo as a character is deaf. I like how they use the Scrabble lettering to spell it out for you right here, and in the background you see the sign language alphabet going across the pages. And I don't think I can even stop mentioning the art style of each page. Even the words are incorporated into the art style. It's not just standout words. There are some chat boxes, which you see on the next side of the page, but a lot of them are drawn into the painting itself. And these ones are explained to us that if something does happen in words, it doesn't happen in the sound of words, but in the color of them and the mood and texture. And the words explaining this are an example of what she means, where they're part of the environment and not just a standalone statement. Also get this little bit at the bottom where it says, and the mystery of their crossword puzzle meanings. I'm not sure what that means, but I'm pretty sure we'll figure it out along the way. And Maya's story happens in music. And she has a very philosophical approach where her life doesn't take place in the sound of the notes, but the silence in between them. And I love these little hints to her heritage with the patterns down the middle, on the side there, feathers coming out from behind the pictures, really signifying her indigenous heritage. We even get hints that she's in love with Matt Murdock, Daredevil. You can see her drawing of the two of them dancing on this music sheet, which is, I like that little nod to the music and dancing, as well as the drawing with her and Daredevil in his outfit. Even the credits page for this issue has some beautiful artwork. It looks more of a pastel look, but you get this full frame kind of shot right in the center, similar to the picture in the previous page. I like these little touches of sign language. You get the motion for C, and even so much as the title of the page, the Echo Part 1, in that Scrabble style that we see. Just phenomenal art page to page. And for having little words, this is a lot of explanation in one picture for an origin story for this character. You get the idea that she was deaf as a kid right from the start. Again, like I mentioned, nothing crazy, no accident happened to give her her deafness. She was just born that way. She loved to draw growing up because it was one of her biggest forms of communication. When you're deaf, you don't really have the same type of language skills, and let alone being able to communicate with someone because you can't hear their response. So a lot of your impressions of the world are more visual than anything. And I like these little music notes around her head. They very much feel like in her mind, she just always hears music, but it's broken music. So it's just kind of what her mind is making up. And I love how they used Maya drawing out her experiences in this panel. It tells you a lot about her life without having to go into deep explanation. Your imagination kind of fills in the blanks for what she's drawing. The first one looking at it says dad, and what she drew is her visual impression of her father. He has a smile on, not very detailed face, but you get the point where he's smiling, he's happy. She has a positive view of her father. The next one saying mom, there's nothing on there because she didn't know her mother. It was just her and her dad for the longest time. So she has a deeper connection with her father, very positive connection with her father, but doesn't know anything about her mom, so she has nothing to draw. Next one being Mr. Fist, which is referencing Kingpin. In the show, they haven't shown that he's a Kingpin yet at this point. We're about episode 3 in by the time I made this video, but it's hinted that there is a mysterious character that adopts Maya. And in the comics, Mr. Fist very much steps up as an adoptive father for her and trains her to be an assassin. So who knows if that's the route they're going in the show, but in these comics, Fisk is very much part of her life. Then there's the chief, who is pretty much a mentor to her, a spiritual guide, connecting her to her indigenous ways and is a guide on her life. Also going on to foretell that her and Daredevil do become a couple in the future, but then it looks like they break up because she says uh-oh and rips the paper. And I like how she explains her life as a foreign film with no subtitles and that you're forced to learn the language. How she could never hear her father, so she really learned to decipher his expressions, every little inch of his mouth moves, eyes, whatever, to just figure out what he's getting across to her. And I like this little panel off the side here where she asks, do expressions make noises? And you know, that's a good question, and I want to leave that up to you guys in the comments below. Tell me if you think an expression can make a noise. And I just want to read to you what they wrote down here, just as an example to show you even the words that they do put in purposely have an artistic feel to them and how it adds to the entire painting of this picture. His lips mouth to you the silent secrets of the universe, and you wonder if you could hear, if the world of sound was open to you, what kind of glorious music would his smile make? Which is beautifully said and beautifully done, how it flows across the page here. You see that smile growing and pointing out that this is what she's seen. This is her vision. She sees her father's smile, and what kind of sound does that make to her? Just beautiful storytelling. And looking at this page, you see a whole mold of different types of art styles throughout this. You get that kind of charcoal on parchment look for her playing on the piano, but then this beautiful watercolor look for her father's face. And I like little art tricks that they use to describe her view of certain people. Like Fisk is all white and still kind of penciled in, not a super defined face, kind of very generic looking face. She understands he's bald, big guy, and that's just very preliminary observation of her, whereas her father has that full colored in face, very detailed, because she's looked at that face so many times. In her mind, it's a very defined face, whereas Fisk is kind of new to the scene for her. And being deaf, she starts to really know how to read the body language of people, every little tweak and quirk in their smile, in their face, and she becomes attuned to it. Really airs the sentiment of actions speak louder than words. And this explains it better than I ever could. Your eye and mind become keen to the intricate voices and textures of the visual and tactile world moving around you. Particularly looking at the black and white picture that's in the center of this page, you get all these little written in notes, which are Maya's thoughts for each little aspect of the world around her. She hugs her dad and she can feel her heartbeat through the clothes that he's wearing. She knows he has a gun, but it's for work, so she doesn't really question it too much. Even describing Kingpin as her father's friend and that they work together, so she understands a little bit of their relationship. With these chat boxes telling us the poetry of the movement speaks to her, it calls to her, and sometimes she has to answer back. She draws about everything she's observing. She knows her dad has a gun and that's a secret he takes to work, as well as Fisk works with her father, as we mentioned in the previous pages. And the background of this page is a callback to the origin page in this comic. In the same style, you see her lying on the ground drawing and the character holding that board explaining her origin story, but this time it's a more of a collage of different things. Maya saying that she draws everywhere, just not on paper. She draws on the walls at school for show and tell. The teacher says, Maya, don't. I like how she drew the teacher saying it, and then the artist of the comic wrote out Maya don't in the letter block. And for the longest time in her life, no one realized that she was deaf, only her. And even then, I don't think she fully grasped the idea that not everyone can hear. And she was misdiagnosed for the longest time, all the adults believing it was some sort of mental disability. And I like this style choice of having to turn the book to see the other text. This is explaining that she went to a special school where she quickly learned the read lips for the words no Maya. She must have done a lot of stuff where teachers and that were always saying no to her, and that must be very discouraging. But she loved that her father never told her to stop. He would just laugh at the things she would do. He doesn't care if she speaks or not. He loves her all the same. And again, we're getting beautiful page after beautiful page. This one talking about how she realized at one point that things actually made a sound, what the concept of sound was. And kids, being the curious creatures they are, she wanted to know what everything sounds like. What does laughter sound like? What sound does the grass make? And there's a beautifulness to it. In my privilege of being able to hear my whole life, I never really have to ask those questions. What does the grass make as a sound? I didn't need to know that because I know that it doesn't make a sound. But someone who's never heard that, it's such an interesting, inquisitive question to have at such a young age. She goes on to ask, what sound does the clouds make? Does the sunshine make a noise? These are great questions. What does the rainbow sound like? What? Like, I would never have thought you see a rainbow, it could be making a sound. If I had to choose, it'd be like a whoa, whoa, whoa. And it breaks your heart that these questions make her dad laugh and cry because he knows that these are ridiculous questions. But at the same time, he is heartbroken by the fact that his daughter can't hear them and just know for herself. She has to ask these because she has no other knowledge of it. And it goes to tear your heart that last little bit where when she sees her dad cry, she asks, what does that sound like? Ugh, that tugs at the heartstrings. Now we know her father is a kingpin employee. We get that sense in this comic as well as in the Hawkeye show. She worked for a mysterious figure higher up than himself, which is hinted or assumed to be Fisk in the show. Explaining how after he performed a crime, sometimes he had to go lay low for a while just to let the heat die. He'd go to a place called the reservation, or the res for short, saying how this wasn't a conventional reservation for a particular tribe. It was more of a meeting zone for any other type of tribe that was just passing by in or out. Some would stay longer time, some would stay shorter, but this was always a safe place for them to go. Maya used to go with her dad from time to time when he had to lay low. But her recollection of this place is very faint. She has this kind of amber visualization of it. A swirl of sunline faces sculpted in the firelight, so that's probably a group of them hanging around a bonfire while they tell stories of their ancestors and other legends. We go on to see this page covered in squares. A lot of this is just sign language on the left side here, explaining different terms and words. You got one for chief in there, which is important. And on the right side, showing all these pictures and explaining what those mean. This is very hieroglyphic-esque picture drawing, a very useful tool back in the day. And a newspaper clipping at the top of the page explaining how between all the tribes, the American tribes, that they all spoke different languages, but because they couldn't communicate vocally, they all knew the sign language needed to communicate with each other. So it was a very universal language around all these tribes, pointing out an interesting difference that I didn't know about, that their sign language, their communication style was more from the heart. So when they signed around their chest, whereas more of a modern style signs from the head area, which is a super fascinating difference between the two sign languages. You can almost equate it to an accent. And in the center of this page, it has a drawing of who Maya calls the chief, which she believed because he was a retired firefighter or an editor, which is such a funny thing to think about. She knows like a fire chief and she knows an editor-in-chief. So a chief of a tribe is kind of a new concept for her at the time. But even then, her detailed view of him was very spot on, where he was regarded as a spiritual leader, which makes sense. Some would call him a shaman, saying that people would come to him for advice and guidance, which is very akin to a chief's role. Maya going on to say she primarily saw him as a storyteller, and through the chief, she learned Indian Sign Language. And this was Maya's first experience talking to someone who understood fully that she could not hear him, talking to her heart and mind with the use of pictures. And she has that same curiosity, that is that what being a shaman is, a storyteller? And she's not too far off. And it's cute that she X out the sign that you need to explain hearing. The chief telling her that he is a storyteller because he can say things in ways that others will understand the true meaning. You are also like that, he says to Maya. You see things in ways others do not. You are also a storyteller. You have many talents. Maya's like, how do you know this? How do you know I'm a storyteller? The chief went on a vision quest apparently. Maya's like, what's a vision quest? The chief goes on to explain, if we really want to know ourselves, we must at some point in our lives connect with a higher wisdom that's known all about us. Our weaknesses, our potentials, our mistakes. Many Native American tribes do this through our meditation known as a vision quest. The setting aside of a time and place alone in nature to connect with the higher power and explore that which is within. Somewhere in that space of time as we are questing, answers come. It's an opportunity to know more about ourselves and our choices in life. Maya's sitting there with a mystified look on her face, and then she asks, "What sound do clouds make?" I like the kind of scrapbook feel to this page. It looks like Maya put this together. You got some sketches of the chief in the background. You got this lace going around bordering the words. And this is just a phenomenal page to look at. In the center, Maya talking about how some of the stories listening to the chief sounded like superheroes, stories of power and responsibility. And when she was learning to speak and read, she learned it through comic books. And I like this trailing off sentence where Maya writes, "The word balloons in the comics made me think of smoke signals," which is a pretty accurate description. She's telling these stories to her dad and saying she wants to be a storyteller too. He laughs and says that she already is. And this is another part I want to read to you guys. This is very well worded for what it's trying to portray to you. "But I say that I must learn my own language to tell my stories, more than signs, more than sounds, more than words. Pass on my stories through my own medium like the comic book artist so that you can understand even if you don't hear like me. Even if you don't know what sound clouds make, you could feel my stories." Which is a phenomenal goal for a little girl to have. Even looking at the picture of Maya and the chat bubble coming out of her mouth doesn't have words in it, it has pictures, which is her style of storytelling. Maya going to be her own story shaman. She's going to be her own fire chief. And again, the storytelling is phenomenal in this one. Her father laughs and laughs, his big house-shaking laugh. It is the kind of laugh that I feel in my bones, even when he is finished. Is that what an echo is? Before I go to sleep, he tells me a story and laughs some more. That is the last time I ever feel his laughter. Before even reading further down the page, you kind of get a sense of what's coming. That's not true. I still feel it now. This story is his story, my history. He is the vibration on the piano keys. I am just the silence between them. I'm 9 years old when my father dies. And Hawkeye kind of does the same thing in the show where she sees her father get killed and goes to talk to him, and he puts his bloody hand on her face, leaving the mark. She wasn't 9 at the time in the show. She was a little bit more full grown, but the sentiment is still the same. And again, the little thoughts of Maya written on the page. I remember being in the ambulance. He put his hand on my face, then it falls lifeless, and he leaves me with only his echo. So this is really showing where her idea of the name came from. Does sadness make a noise? Maya asked, referencing back to when she said that she was going to fall in love with Daredevil, as we saw in her little origin panels, and also how she portrayed that it was going to end badly where they break up in the end. We have up in the right corner a symbol for bad, as well as the broken heart, and then the heart symbol motion for sign language underneath that. In behind the drawn picture, we still have a shot of Maya's face with the blood on her forehead. Looks like an older version of her, but she still keeps that symbol for her Echo outfit. On these left panels, what looks like Kingpin aiming a gun, saying he shot someone. It doesn't exactly say who, and I believe it might be her father that Kingpin killed. And on the right side, it shows another character in the same pose as Kingpin from the previous one. I believe that character is Maya. It's really hard to tell in my opinion, but it looks like she's getting revenge. It's implying she's getting revenge on Kingpin for killing the guy she loves. And showing that bang, she said she doesn't hear it. It's signifying that she did pull that trigger, and she feels it through her body like she would with her father's crazy laughter. And in this center shot is a beautiful picture of Echo. You have that white hand on her face, her father's hand that was there when he died. And then underneath you get these two panels, these two sign panels, one for death and one for I did it, saying that she was the one who killed someone, which is why I believe that this panel is her. But she doesn't really go into detail about who she killed, except for this little hint at the bottom where it shows Fisk X'd out, as well as these other pictures similar to the previous page. This beautiful art explaining that doing so made her feel almost empty inside, with the talking at the very bottom reading, "First I will bury the worst parts of my memory, the dead parts of my heart in the hole. Then I will cover it up and plant something inside it, something that will grow." On the top right here, you have that sign language motion for hole, and then in the bottom left, the sign language motion for grow. And then off in the bottom right, you have her saying, "But I'm not sure if the dead parts will stay buried. I'm done with them, but I don't think they are done with me." Going to a full spread page of just beautiful art here, and steps away from that pencil and paper look from the previous pages, you get this huge overarching figure of Kingpin behind what looks like a sad Daredevil, and a version of Maya holding on to her innocence. her innocence being a younger version of herself, saying how she met a really great guy, someone that she could relate to, being Daredevil, which he is blind and she is deaf, so they share similarities in life struggles. Then someone she trusted tried to manipulate her, someone being Kingpin, I believe, who adopted her, so she trusted him to a degree, and then Kingpin ended up hurting her father and ending up getting him killed. Kingpin manipulated her using her emotions towards her father, and ended up Kingpin betraying her father and getting him killed. She went on and did something about it. This is another hint that she killed Kingpin, and reading the wording going around Daredevil here, it says, "But what I did destroyed my relationship with this guy, and I left the country. Believe it or not, I wrote a play about it." And that seems like what led to them breaking up, was that he was disappointed in her for killing Fisk. This right side being a depiction of her heartbroken self and her trying to hold on to her innocence, which is the memory of her childhood. Talking about how sometimes she frames her memories as paintings she's seen, which we'll understand this better as the pages go on. After her and Daredevil broke up, she seems to have traveled the world, just visiting place to place and learning things. She fell back into her previous love of art. Every country she went to, she looked at the art and she seen herself in the paintings. And in the background of this bottom panel, you get a similar art style to what she's witnessing above. In the top left, you have a crude picture of Daredevil. Underneath that, a version of herself with the hand mark on her face from her father, with her father underneath of her there. On the right side, you get Crazy Horse stabbed in the back, which could be another reference to her father being Crazy Horse, and a crude drawing of Fisk here with his gun. Underneath that, you see a version of what she says is her childhood dead. And if I've said it once, I said it again, this book is full of beautiful art. Even if it looks like it's hand drawn, if you zoom out this, it looks like Maya was doing this and recreating her experiences, but it does have that comic book style to it. Remembering earlier that she said she was inspired by that comic book style, and this is very much similar to that, really reflecting her experiences. Next panel introducing more color into her art, which she says is kind of the sound of the painting. The color emphasizes different parts. Again, also reflecting the Daredevil and what looks like Fisk on the right side, still emphasizing her experiences through her art. With every painting, her art style gets more and more impressed. Her use of color is getting infinitely better, and this one looks like almost a self-portrait of herself. She does self-portraits in this Van Gogh Starry Night style. She's trying to find herself in the colors. And the more she does these pictures of herself, she's trying to break herself down into the very base form of her being, every time rearranging herself back when she makes these drawings of herself. She keeps seeing this confusion in her pictures, her guilt, her anger that she can't seem to work out. Showing a lot of anger through her pictures. In this one, she's holding Daredevil on her left hand, and on the right side, it almost looks like a hand replicating holding a gun. Then she hits those depressive lows, and that comes across in her painting as well, a self-portrait of herself in a very sullen state with these blues and these dark purples. Looking back again to one of the earlier pictures, which I think is probably my favorite picture in the whole comic book, of her sitting with Daredevil. Ending on this beautiful page again with that same picture of her and Daredevil. She's deciding to confront her problem. The newspapers called him Daredevil, but she knows him as Matt Murdock. You get this self picture of her cuddled away in the corner, pledging that she's going to find Matt, that she is going after Daredevil. And around the edge of this picture, you see, I need to talk, I need to work this out. So she is in struggle with herself. She's trying to figure herself out. And that's it for now. I really enjoyed this comic. The art style throughout the entire thing was just phenomenal, and there hasn't been many other comics that compare to that style that I've seen, that veer away from that classic panel to panel look and rely more on a direct art style. We got more of an insight on who Maya Lopez is as Echo. We get a little bit of her history, and hopefully this comes through in the Hawkeye show when they dive deeper into her character, because right now in the show she is very much on point with what has been described in this comic, and they're on the right track to doing her justice. As always, if you like what you see, be sure to hit that subscribe button as well as the notification button so you know when these things are coming out. Thanks for watching.